Everybody, welcome again to another episode of Mike's Movie Podcast featuring Evan with special guest Adam. For today, we have a unique movie to be reviewing and discussing. Which it's unique in that it's certainly different than what we've ever done before. We're doing Breakfast at Tiffany's today, the 1960s motion picture based on a novel of the same name by Truman Capote. I'm sure we've all seen those posters of Audrey Hepburn smoking the cigarette with that long cigarette extending thing. I don't know if that's related to this movie or not, but that's what we're discussing today. And we also might be, well, actually, now that I say this, so Evan, in texting about this movie before, you were asking, kind of like, why did you decide on this particular movie?
Yeah, well,
question. One of the reasons why that went into it is I have a compilation CD called Nonstop 90s, and should not come as a surprise that one of the songs on there is the Breakfast at Tiffany's by Deep Blue Something. And for a while, as I've mentioned in different podcasts, I wanted to discuss, watch and discuss and review an older movie. So like we have Larry and Benny and Bridgie K. Like those are like top tier older movies, but I kind of wanted something that was like a tier below that in quality, but something that still everybody knew about. And that's how, that's those two things together are how we came on this one. But I've been talking enough. How's everybody doing?
I'm almost ready for bed because Evan made us wait an hour, and I'm dying to hear what he was doing. It was so boring.
Yeah. So we had to push this podcast back a couple of times. So we'll talk about that. Which the more we can say that doesn't have anything to do with the movie, I feel like the better. Not because it's a bad movie, Mike, as you alluded to, and I want more detail on besides what you gave, because I'm not satisfied with that explanation as to why you chose this. But this movie, aside from one glaring little nuance to it, is not what you would call kind of traditional MMPC content, which is what makes it special, right? I like that you picked it. It's an outlier. If we look at the past few things that we've done, Major Payne, The Lighthouse, movies with some sort of, I don't know what you would call it, little
energy. It's almost always very masculine movies.
Masculine energy, or just movies that are kind of shitty or 90s penis boy type stuff. You don't know what a penis boy is, God help you. But this is a piece of whatever classic Criterion cinema.
And I don't think it's ever been as part of the Criterion collection.
Right. Well, yeah.
So what were you doing the past hour?
I don't know why I was grading papers. So I'm really, let me also say,
lowest grade.
Let me also say I'm a little offended that neither of you has commented on my glasses. Now,
I thought it was creepy to Audrey Hepburn sunglasses in the movie, that you were doing some cosplay.
I'm not a person who needs glasses. I don't wear glasses, but this is me now. I wanted to let you know this is me. I thought it would be good to show you guys and everybody that, I'm here, I'm in business, and I'm a professor. And so that's what I was doing, was professor stuff.
Highest grade, lowest grade, I want to know.
Now,
were there any pluses?
Let me tell you something. The graduate school at the university where I work does not use the A, B, C system.
Well, whatever. Quantitative. How many cheeseburgers were you given these papers?
The quantitative range of grades was 75 to 95 cheeseburgers. Nobody.
That sounds like you're just letting them all skate by.
No, there's actually
failing grade.
So like the way it works is like you can get, at most grad students get P's or pass. Exceptional grad students get an H. You have to get a 96 to get an H on an assignment.
What does it stand for?
High pass. But it shouldn't be thought of as like an A. And if you don't do well enough, you get an L. That's a low pass. If you get below an 80, you get an L. So you want to be in that 80 to 95 range.
You're saying 75 is subpar in this.
Couple L's on this one, yeah, for sure. Not uncommon.
Those people should drop out and work in the service industry.
Yeah, it's mainly just like, they're not dumb for the most part. They just can't write or won't put forth effort. So
Dumb. Are you sure they're not dumb?
Well, the whole thing about writing reminds me of a character from Breakfast at Tiffany's.
okay, so yeah, Mike, is it really just because you heard the 90s song Breakfast at Tiffany's?
I am also incredulous, Mike. I don't believe it.
I don't
Like,
believe
is that your favorite song on the CD? What else is on that CD?
Okay, so on that CD, there is also, you have Toad the Wet Sprocket.
Can't.
Is one of them. Also have a little porno for pyros. What is it? The Dog's Eye View, the Everything Falls Apart is on there. Brick by Ben Folds 5, Mr. Jones by, of course, Counting Crows. What is it with Mother Mother? I don't know. I don't remember who the artist on that particular song is. And what else is on there? Oh yeah, Little Miss Can't Be Wrong, the other song by the Spin Doctors. So on that one, no. So that is the the reason why the 90% reason why this movie was selected is I wanted to find kind of a classic era, well-known movie to watch, and I felt like Citizen Kane, which I had suggested earlier, or something like Casablanca would be a little bit too on the nose of like classic era.
Real quick, have you and or Evan seen Citizen Kane and or Casablanca?
I have, yeah.
I actually
Evan?
have. I have. Despite my general ignorance of things film related, I do like the movie Casablanca, and I have a special edition 2-tape VHS set with some interviews and special features that I will watch. The movie relaxes me, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I hate Humphrey Bogart.
I don't
Citizen
give a
Kane,
shit about
sure.
Humphrey Bogart.
Casablanca now.
Don't
Yeah,
give a shit about Humphrey, but I like the movie.
Yeah, and then the way the song plays into the selections, I for the criteria I was describing about a classic era movie, I just couldn't think of the one that fit that description, and that's how the song.
I'm glad. I think it's great. And this is definitely a movie I very likely would have never seen in my entire life. I would have died never having seen this movie if you hadn't made this choice to have to watch it.
Yeah.
And honestly, I now having watched it, it's pretty much what I thought it was going to be. And I could have lived a full and happy life never having seen it. But I'm very happy to discuss it on this podcast.
Yes. Well, yeah, certainly. And I guess I'll just go ahead and start with talking about the part of the movie that I had no idea existed, and that is Mickey Rooney's character.
That's the only thing I'd seen before. I'd seen a compilation of all his parts in isolation.
And that.
I wanted to say, did you guys also watch it on Amazon Prime?
I did, yes.
And so it
Did
said
you notice-
yellow face warning this movie.
I don't even think that is considered politically correct to refer to it as yellow face. I saw that on Amazon. I was like, wow, okay, Jeffrey.
Yeah, no, I was initially baffled and intrigued by that, and then I remember
You don't even see drugs. You hear drugs talked about.
right. Definitely no sex. I don't know what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah,
What do you mean,
all false advertising.
Yeah.
Whoa.
It made me more excited. I was like, wow, sex, drugs, and yellow face? My three favorite things in a movie?
Even they,
And then I only got one of the three, and I already knew about that one.
yellow face, I didn't even know that was a thing. That like I mean, I knew what it meant when I said it.
If you can search for that on Amazon, just like click that as a tag and see every other movie they have tagged as yellow face.
Yes. You'll also like yellow face. It could be a horror movie. It could be like a 90s horror movie straight to VHS. Yeah. And honestly, that's something the first thing I thought when I saw, like, I don't know, Adam, you'll know more about the details, but like the images of Mickey Rooney's face close. I mean, they really, for some reason, were milking that. Like they were milking that just image of him, like,
It's hilarious.
What's that?
I said they're milking it because it's hilarious.
It's grotesque. It seemed like something that should be on the cover of Fangoria magazine. It's just this.
That's just his real face with some fake teeth.
Right, Mickey Rooney's already horrific, but like to give this like really over the top Japanese caricature. So yeah.
It made me curious how he's described in the book, because it's based on a book. And like, what does the book say that's how
the book says, middle-aged white man who with station with yellow face, wearing dentures.
Well, the thing is, when we launch, Mike's book podcast, we can read the book itself. But yeah, no, that is something about a movie that I never touched on or never knew existed. I will also say that this also kind of just like falls into a general fear that I have of like, I know I'm at work or something and having a conversation when I'm like, oh yeah, you should watch Breakfast at Tiffany's, and then they watch Breakfast at Tiffany's, and then they like have the Mickey Rooney character in there, and they're like, so anyway, so
I want to know, I thought that was very funny. Did you guys think that was funny?
Well, of course. Yeah.
Well, in what sense? Yeah.
For a second, it seemed like when you said it was grotesque, it sounded like you were going to try and say it wasn't funny. It may be grotesque, but it is also funny.
It is by definition grotesque. Like it's completely like exaggerated and deviates from. I mean, I want to know. I don't know enough about like our relations with. I suppose it was only like 15 years after World War II, after Pearl Harbor, right? But like the fact that was just sort of, and it's presented in a movie that's just sort of be like, yep, here's a funny Japanese guy, he's like a clown. Those Japanese people. I don't know. Like, how is that taught?
I will say, Mickey Rooney famously was drafted and served in World War II. Like he had his main career is pre-World War II, and then he was a soldier in World War II. And this was like his comeback post like career slump after World War II, which makes it even funny.
Don't you think that totally explains it? He's like in charge of that character, and like they basically like gave him carte blanche to sort of just like, you know what, Mickey, just do whatever you want. You're gonna be the landlord. And he decided on his own, like, yeah, I'm gonna do this really offensive Japanese character.
I'm sure that it has to be a Japanese character in the book. There's no way he made the character Japanese.
True. I forgot it was a book.
But the actual like character itself and what he was doing reminded me a bit of like a Jerry Lewis kind of like clumsy character, and I guess I just have never found that to be particularly funny.
It's funny.
I haven't either, but I do know in my heart of hearts that Jerry Lewis is the missing link between Charlie Chaplin, Buster Keaton, and Ernest P. Worrell. And I know at some point in my life I will get into Jerry Lewis because that is the Ernest archetype, which is also the Mr. Bean archetype and a thing that I know and love. And that just because I've never got into that one, I know that is a thing in general that I love.
Mm-hmm. Well, yes. I mean, Mickey read that. That's like it's a special like treat, a dessert from the rather bland meal. And I don't say bland. So the movie's the meal. I don't say bland because it's boring. It's just because it is what it is. It's a movie. And the characters, you got the two main characters, as typically happens with movies. good movies, I found that I could very closely identify with both the main characters.
Are you joking?
No,
Because the number one thing I didn't like about this movie, I was like, these people are both stupid assholes that I hate. I couldn't identify with Mickey Rooney more than either of the leads.
I also I agree that they're stupid. They're very. There was something about those characters, particularly the male, that very repulsive. But they both represent a kind of archetype I could identify with.
That's intense. That's horrifying. I'm sorry for you because I hated them both so much, and I don't see that in you. So I hope that is an inaccurate self-assessment that you see yourself.
So basically,
my thoughts on this movie are how horrible those characters are, and the idea that we're supposed to like treat them or sympathize with them as protagonists is absurd.
I agree with. Yeah. There's so much to say to that specific point. I'll just to give a quick Cliff's Notes as to explain what I said about identifying, right? So I think, the Holly Golightly character comes up in lots of people where, you have this sort of, whatever you want to call it, inability to attach and fear of attachment, usually induced by some form of trauma. I think that's true for a lot of people, right? That's not that weird of an identification to make. That's why the movie's so famous. The guy, though, this is the thing that I was repulsed by, but like the way that he just kind of gets jacked around by this like flighty, ditzy, whatever, do whatever I want, and he just kind of like follows her, and he's just got this flat face, like, yes, I will do that.
So much.
I will give you what you want. I love you. I was really hoping that, because my prediction for the end of the movie, I knew nothing about the movie. I knew what it was, and I knew Audrey Hepburn was in it. My prediction was that, like, yeah, he's going to do some grand gesture, and she's already going to be in Brazil, and he's never going to see her again. That would have been the right way, in my mind, to end the movie.
The 1970s way the movie ended.
Exactly. But then, they get the cat, and they kiss, and it's just like, ugh.
well, so Evan, I just want to say real quick. So if let's say for Cronenberg's version of The Fly, if let's say instead of it being Jeff Goldblum and instead of it being a fly, if it was Holly Golightly and it was Paul and they walked into the portal, you would come out the other side.
Yeah, I think that's a really brilliant Mike statement, but I think people that's not what I'm saying. It's not what I'm saying. My point in saying that was twofold. One, I just wanted to say, obviously these are relatable character archetypes. Two, I always think I'm every character in every movie when you watch it. That's the joke. I'm everything. So no, it would take a lot more than that to join into, Brundle Evan or whatever.
You have to have Rooney in there.
Yeah. Wolverine. Arnold Schwarzenegger.
But wait, I want to go back. I didn't get Mike to directly address whether he thinks Mickey Rooney is funny in this movie or not.
No, I did not. I did not. I did not like this.
You didn't laugh. You didn't laugh at any of the scenes with Mickey Rooney in this movie.
No, I did not.
Yeah.
I did not. I find like that type of character, that type of Jerry Lewis character, and that humor. I just find it to be abrasive.
Well, I mean, it's deliberately abrasive, but here's a follow-up question. Have you ever in your life found an over-the-top racial stereotype funny?
Right. So key distinction.
Let him answer. Let him answer.
There you know it.
Okay, go ahead, Mike.
I mean, there's nothing that I can immediately think of now.
What?
Look.
This is blowing my mind. This is the most mind-blowing Mike Movie podcast ever. Because I completely understand and agree that racial stereotypes are inappropriate and bad for culture and society. However, on an instinctual primal level, when done well, they still crack me up. And this one definitely cracked me up. And it made me think of something related to cultural opinions on racial stereotypes as comedy, which is someone I work with who is vaguely a normal person recently got into RuPaul's Drag Race and started watching RuPaul's Drag Race from the start. The show's been on a very long time, mid 2000s. And she was appalled to report to us that in the early seasons of RuPaul's Drag Race, in one of the challenges that they did, an Asian drag queen on the show chose to do a kind of Mickey Rooney in Breakfast at Tiffany style self-stereotype. And she was shocked that it was allowed to be on television. And I was like, she was like, it's just, it wasn't that long ago, but things were so different back then. And what struck me is, so it's like, okay, obviously racial stereotypes are bad because it's kind of like mawkish, inaccurate portrayal of negative things that aren't representative. But then I was like, isn't drag basically gender stereotyping? And like, how close are we to drag being considered as like absurd that we ever tolerated it as racial stereotyping? I'm fine with all of it. I am entertained by all of it. But the idea that like someone doing a race stereotype for comedy bad, someone doing gender stereotype for entertainment good, is something, and I brought it up at work because this is the kind of thing I like to bring up with people that barely know me. And everyone was just like, yeah, I don't know.
They don't want
And I'm to hear your thoughts.
people don't know that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'll say this time, it's an interesting question, and I do have extended thoughts on that. It's one of these things though where I know it's overall it's a sensitive issue, and I'm not sure if I'm able to articulate or properly discuss my thoughts in a way where in a way that I'd be comfortable having recorded. Is it really what I'm going to?
That's what podcast is all about.
What was that?
We're working it out. That's what that's why we have the podcast, to work through these difficult issues.
Well,
Yeah.
my feeling is, and I'm going to make a reference to some of my brother's work on a high school theme called Chocolate Father. That the reason I find those kinds of things funny, and first of all, just to rewind just a second, I agree with Mike that the Jerry Lee Lewis, just like Mr. Bean.
Jerry Lee Lewis is a different person than Jerry Lewis. To be
Whatever.
clear.
Is Jerry Lee Lewis a guitarist, right? Yeah.
The fire, yeah.
So I don't like the just sort of spastic,
Oh, nice lady.
yeah, that's this Mickey Rooney thing was funny because it was racist. And I'm not afraid to say that on camera, because people thinking racial stereotypes up in a way that is supposed, like people sitting down and constructing a character in order to make it look racist is fun. Like that's fun. You have to step back to get that, right? Like it's not an obvious thing. But if you can get past the whole like, wow, that's shockingly racist, because it is. This one in particular is shockingly racist. It's aggressively racist, which is what makes it so funny, right? It's like, holy shit, these idiots like really sat down and thought like, yeah, we're gonna really get the Japanese. What? That's so silly and stupid. That's funny. You should laugh at that.
Well, when you say funny, are you like talking about like the absurdity of it? That
Yes.
like the Mickey Rooney character is like carefully thought out and planned, and like they give the idea to the director, and the director's like, all right, let's put it in the movie. Like just the general.
Yes, it's an absurdity.
Yeah.
Absurdity of it. So that's what the Chocolate Father magazine was all. Well, they did. Chocolate Father had a special issue that was called Blacks versus Whites. And the Chocolate Father editorial team was a racially and ethnically diverse group of artists, and they all understood this point that I'm making. And their idea was to poke fun at racist and racism as often portrayed in propaganda and whatever goofy shit. And so they made these little comic strips with like blatantly stupid racist things, like a comic strip. Like one example would be like, a kid is asking his dad if his friend can come over to sleep over this weekend. So it's like, hey dad, can my friend Mike come over to spend the night on Friday? The dad says, what's his skin color? Kid says, well, he's black. Dad says, I don't think so. And that's the end of the whole joke. I think that's the joke. I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, but do you think that this one was? So I think yeah. So what you're just describing is
No, this
is
was the movie is racist.
yeah.
The movie's character is racist, but we're laughing at it because that is funny, not because making fun of Japanese people is funny. At least for me, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but what you're saying is that the Chocolate Father publication is making fun of stuff like Breakfast at Tiffany's.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Now, of course, this is a discussion. Lots of people think like, well, you shouldn't even. I'm sure many people wouldn't even want Breakfast at Tiffany's to be available to watch, which is that's a big, whatever, like Pandora's box that we could open. Right?
Well, I mean, of course, I mean, well, the thing is with it is what's going on at just for posterity for what is going on right now, which has been a heavily discussed talking point on Fox News, for example, is some of the depictions of ethnic groups in older Dr. Seuss books.
Right, and they're getting old.
It is a topical thing.
Yep, and of course that's a little different because those books are read to children.
Yeah,
who can't make these distinctions. I'm not saying I agree that the book should be canceled because of that.
Yeah.
That's an important point.
Yeah. Well, I do know that like Warner Brothers, for example, like I think they have their vast archives, and like some of the cartoons like in like the 1940s, like for World War II, are extremely racist.
Right.
With some of the stuff that they have there. But I know that like Warner Brothers basically is like, this represented the humor of the era, and instead of just like trying to delete it from history, we're just going to keep it here and like recontextualize it, which seems to me to be the right approach.
Yeah.
I think in a sense, I mean, it still is a meaningful cultural touchstone. Like at the time that Breakfast at Tiffany was made, just like a pop culture depiction like Mickey Rooney's was just like, yeah, that was just like totally what was going on at the time. So I think there's some value in that, and acknowledging that.
It's on my mind because I watch a lot of Mad TV these days. And if there's one thing Mad TV liked to do a lot of, it was racial stereotypes. And it cracked me up then, it cracks me up now. And, obviously it's different when, people of a race satirize their own race versus something like a Caucasian World War II veteran doing an impression of a Japanese person. But to me, regardless, things that it is to me that a racial stereotype is whether it's funny or not has no bearing on whether it is a racial stereotype. And there are some that are funny, there are some that are not funny. Mickey Rooney is funny to me. There's plenty of racial stereotypes on Mad TV that are funny to me. It's not inherently funny because it's a racial stereotype, but it is a genre of comedy that has been done through the ages to varying degrees of success, and there are many examples that I still enjoy to this day.
Yep, it's good. This is great discussion. So,
you know what? Related to that, in terms of like net, so we can all agree that even though none of us had ever seen it, Breakfast at Tiffany's is a big movie. A lot of people seen it. I was shocked to discover Izzy had seen it. A lot of people seen it, and in terms of like potential positive or negative cultural societal impact, the idea that Holly Golightly and fucking towhead nothing man other guy are like in any way empathetic characters is to me like exponentially more toxic than like that's supposed to be whatever than the ridiculous, absurd, over the top Mickey Rooney shit. And when Evan was doing his impersonations of Towhead Man's relationship with Holly Golightly, it made me realize it hadn't occurred to me watching the movie. Holly Golightly is kind of the proto manic pixie dream girl archetype. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I hate most about this movie is how emblematic of something I don't really know the right word for. Something that I hate is just like New York City, what's the word? Like socialite. New York City socialite pornography. You know, like Sex in the City is another example. And like Holly Golightly as just like bimbo with no job who just wishy-washy goes around being an asshole, exploiting people for money, almost getting in all kinds of violence and barely escaping. Is like, oh, wouldn't it be, let's all move to New York and get drunk guys to give us money and somehow life will just be okay. Like, I hate it so much.
Oh yeah.
I don't find her cute. I just find her enraging. And that's her thing. Her whole thing is like, like free-spirited princess woman who everyone's just like, oh, Audrey, don't you just want to hug her and have her as a little pet? And I'm like, no, fucking.
No, I want to say on that one too. First of all, I found that character to be very, very inconsiderate.
She's the worst.
Well,
Yeah.
especially
Yeah.
because she wouldn't even have intercourse with Fred. Is that right?
Separate from any of the transactional sex stuff, she's still an asshole. The way she is party, she weighs the is everywhere. She's just going around like selfishly abusing anyone she gets around with for her own entertainment.
Well, and I'll say I think an important scene if at the end of the movie, I think that Holly Golightly committed an absolutely unforgivable act of just throwing the cat out of the taxi.
Absolutely, should have been put against the firing squad wall.
Yeah, that one was bad news. And then also with about that scene too is Paul. He doesn't like immediately get out of the cab to go after the cat either.
Yeah, so he doesn't get shot, but he gets like his finger cut off or something.
Yeah. So yeah, no, that wasn't good. And I also there was a scene in the movie too where when they go to the Five and Dime and they commit an act of theft.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Just for fun, not even something they want or need. Just to rob from a like cheap store for fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do not support that. So those are the things.
Is probably what Winona Ryder was watching that made her shoplift.
Speaking of
entirely possible.
Ryder, who's in a not famous but I think well-known movie, Girl Interrupted, about just sort of like this sort of hysterical, traumatized portrayal of female characters with mental illness.
Here's a related question I have to what we're talking about with Holly Golightly. In your opinions, because it's definitely left ambiguous in the movie, of the men we see Holly with in the movie, in your minds, which ones, if any, did she have sex with in the course of the film?
I don't know that she had sex with any of them.
Yeah.
Sure, not explicitly, the none. It's because it was 1961 or whatever. There's no way. But the fact that Amazon saw fit to tag it for sexual content implies to me we're supposed to know at least.
That to me, that was my answer to that, was that Fred was the whatever.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah. Which was a development in the movie I did not expect. In my mind, I view any movie that was made before like 1983 to be just like puritanical, no sex at all. It's like that's not even in that, which I know is not true, but that's like the way that I see it. So watching this movie is to have one of the primary characters to be a gigolo, who is clearly exchanging intercourse for money, was not something that I expected.
Was he a gigolo, or was he just had this one little relationship? He was.
I mean, every gigolo has their first customer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I thought that was the
Evan's answer is none of them. Holly Golightly does not have sex in the course of the film at all. Mike, feel that way, or did you think any of those people were people she had sex with in the movie?
No, I that would be my thought as well. That she
so you don't think that like when she comes home with the Brazilian guy, they didn't have sex. When her husband comes to visit her, they didn't have sex. When she has her crazy night that they wake up from with the towhead man, they didn't have sex. Those were all just platonic, spending time in a bed together
She might have
situations.
had sex with the Brazilian man because they were like in a relationship for months, right? That was implied that they had been together for a long time.
Sure.
Yeah.
In my opinion, she definitely had sex with the Brazilian guy, who she at the time was intending to marry. I thought that the night that they wake up after their like trying new things day, that was possibly supposed to be them having sex because he's extra possessive and jealous the next day.
Yeah, that could be.
A sure sign of sexual intercourse for a man. And then furthermore, because her husband sweeps her off her feet and shuts the door and Towhead Man mopes his way back upstairs, I thought that also could even have been them having sex.
But I agree with you that the characters are toxic and they've had a toxic influence on culture. And that's absolutely true. Like the proto Audrey as the proto, like women love that. Not all, I shouldn't say that. I should be very mindful about prefacing any sentence that way. Given my track record on the podcast, I've encountered women who are clearly making a concerted effort to embody that same spirit and character of
Absolutely.
the sort of free-spirited manic pixie. Oh, you can't catch me. I've encountered many of those. They're usually mentally ill, and
it's not really in the text of the movie, but like Holly Golightly is totally manic depressive.
Yes.
Right.
I don't remember if that was part of the DSM back then, but that's definitely going on.
Yeah, she's.
And specifically the part when fucking Towhead Man is talking to his dame Patricia O'Neil, and he's breaking up with her, and she's like, "Oh, you found someone who can do more for you?" And he's like, "No, she can do nothing for me, but I can help her." The idea was supposed to be like, oh, that's a good way for people to fall in love with each other, for one of them to decide the other one is a project they're going to help with.
That's what hit close to home in a way that like reflected some of my own character defects, which thankfully I've done a lot of adult work on and I don't suffer from to anywhere near the same extent. But that is a blatant sort of representation of this like toxic white knight male.
Yeah.
Right. And he's just absolutely like subservient, servile, sacrificing, but then at the very end puts his cards on the table, and I think he like explicitly says, you belong to me.
Yes.
I have tried to save you. You belong to me. I put the pixie in the jar, and she acquiesces. It's the most like that. I think this movie should be canceled. No, I don't actually think that, but I agree that racism in the Mickey Rooney shit aside, that's a very negative.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I have nothing to add except for I agree with all of this.
So I mean, when we get to the cheeseburger rating, there's
I do want to get back to something because I did not fully understand your reaction to my David Cronenberg The Fly joke. Did you like that joke or did you not like that joke, Evan?
I loved it. I applauded it.
Yeah,
I did like it. I said that's good work in terms of making a Mike style joke. That's a good one. But would require far more than two movie characters.
Evan doesn't want to reduce
that was good.
Lead the Breakfast with Tiffany.
Look at me.
That was good. I just needed to make sure that I understood that, so I did not. Apologies, but so I did actually. I have some notes on this movie. There's something that I wanted to talk about, which is a couple things actually. I have plenty of notes. Okay, so what I want to talk about is how this movie actually how Paul, also known in the movie as Fred, of course, Fred being the brother of Holly Golightly, but the Paul character, main character. So they go to a cabaret, and I actually went online and I got the script. So I want to read these lines out verbatim because they actually make me think of a lot of the, Joe Satriani, like high performance guitar that we have. So let me tie this together. This actually, the dialogue here actually, I think, really well defined. I think how you can evaluate some of that like high performance guitar music. And Holly says, "Do you think she's talented, deeply and importantly talented?" And Paul says, "No, amusingly and superficially talented, yes, but deeply and importantly, no." And I thought I just couldn't help but think about like some of those like high performance guitar songs of like those are not deeply and important songs.
That was a good note. I would like to just, if I may, double down on that. I'm going to double click on that, Mike.
Don't forget to also hit the subscribe button.
Yeah, I think that's good. You could even say that guitarists like Joe Satriani, Vinnie Moore. Not to be fair, Joe Satriani wrote some solid stuff.
Yeah.
But certainly guys like Vinnie Moore and Yngwie Malmsteen, Steve Vai could put in this category too. The strippers of guitar, right? They are to guitar playing what the stripper is to, an entertainer, I guess. They satisfy a very shallow, impulsive taste.
Mm-hmm.
That was you taking your glasses off makes me think of all the times Holly Golightly does shade tipping in the movie with her ridiculous glasses. Do you guys remember when we were in our 20s in college and big glasses like hers were fashionable for a period of time again?
I'm telling you, this movie has a cult following even now.
No,
watch this and think like, that's me. And yeah, I think it, man.
Well, the two posters that I remember seeing most commonly in college. Number one was some variation of the Jim Belushi wearing a sweater that says college on it. Was number one, and number two was the Audrey Hepburn.
Like people like went to friends' dorms and they had breakfast.
Yeah, they were just like walking around. I mean, you know how it was like with dorms too. Is like, oftentimes people would just have their door open. So you're walking down the hallway, you look in someone's dorm, and you see one of those posters. So they were ubiquitous, as well as like the Pink Floyd poster was one of those too. But
I've gone after gals that act like that, and it's just, you learn your lessons. You hope.
Like Farmer Bob or whatever the fuck. Oh yeah, that's another thing I wanted to ask about Holly Golightly. She married that guy at 14. Mm-hmm. Did you have sex with that guy at 14 if they were married?
Of course.
Okay, of course. Which then the crazy thing to me is this was, I believe, 1961. So it's like in 1961, it's like okay that like Holly Golightly had sex with the farmer guy at 14.
More
but like
okay than it is now.
As I was saying, a year or two later, Kubrick adapts Lolita and they make him age up Lolita because they're like, well, you can't imply a 14-year-old is having sex. That's too risque. And it's like, Holly Golightly did it. Why did Holly Golightly get away with it? And when Stanley Kubrick tried to do it for Lolita, people were like, whoa, hey.
Well, I think in this movie, though, I think that was portrayed as in this movie, I feel like that was portrayed as like a traumatic event.
And do you think it isn't in Lolita?
I've not seen Lolita.
Well, listen. So Lolita is a very good. That is explicitly about a sexual relationship with Lolita.
She's married, so you agree. That's why I opened with, do you think it is assumed that she had sex with that guy?
Well, that's why I then after that asked if Santa Claus was real, because it's not something that's part of the movie. It's not part of the plot of the script. They got married, whatever.
Married platonically.
No, it doesn't. You're not. It's neither. It's not. You're not supposed to know.
I would be very interested to do a scientific survey of people that have seen the movie, whether they think she had sex with her husband or not.
He's saying the reason that Lolita would get more scrutiny on that is because the plot is driven by the sexual encounters that the two characters have.
You don't think that her relationship with her husband is part of the driving part of this plot?
It was a different question. That was about the marriage. There's nothing in it about sex.
Anyway, I think that they're glossing over that stuff with her in a way that Lolita is forcing the issue. You're right in that Lolita is being like, hey, how about this? Lolita's holding it up and being like, what do you think about this? And in this movie, it's like, I mean, like, yeah, that, but we're talking about some other stuff here.
The more subtle point that came out of this that I want to bring up one more time is that
my dogs are mad that I have them blocked out of the room. I'm going to go yell at them. I'll be back.
But I think either, whether you're talking about Lolita or Holly Golightly getting married at 14, that the 60s was a much more acceptable accepting context than right now.
Well, yeah. So what was I don't remember the year, but I believe wasn't it Jerry Lee Lewis who married his cousin when his cousin was 13 years old? So
yeah, that was way before this.
But I don't think that stuff, I don't think people were quite as you had a greater influence of just general conservative religious thinking, but no cancel culture, no Me Too. Those two things alone would prevent anything like this from hitting the mainstream now.
Mm-hmm.
Don't you? I mean, do you agree? I could be wrong.
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I don't think anyone trying to make a Hollywood major motion picture would to have a sexual relationship, explicit or implied, with someone under the age of 18 that wasn't, interrogating that in a critical way if it happened.
No, I agree with that, Adam, because I think in this one, it's like that was just something that happened.
And it hasn't come up on the podcast. I would like to throw out one of my pet topics, which is that teenagers having sex is totally fine, and that I think maybe it came up last time that the age of consent is arbitrary, and that and it actually is relevant to this movie because the idea is like age of consent is like, well, young people are incapable of making an informed decision about their sexual partners in a way that adults can. It's like, okay, I understand the premise. However, I don't think that people over 18 magically gain that ability, and I think it is much more situational, and that I think that all the age of consent stuff is ridiculous and come up with people that were not sexually active at that age to have an informed opinion about it.
Mike, do you want to say anything? Otherwise, I'd like to.
You go ahead, Evan.
Let's put this to bed. We've been down this road before. Okay, yeah, and I know this is an issue that you're passionate about. I don't think any serious person, serious consumer of world history, would look at cultures in the past that were different from ours in terms of things like age of consent and think like, well, that was just inherently bad. To put it another way, I don't think, of course, so hypothetically, you could have a culture where, younger people under 18, what we would call a minor, had a sexual relationship with an adult that was appropriate. The fact that that could exist is not really controversial. What is controversial is that it doesn't now in our culture. We defined a culture in such a way that has emotional consequences and behavioral consequences for the people in it, such that you're not emotionally ready to have an intimate relationship. Now, where you draw the line, it has to be arbitrary because you have to make a uniform standard that's going to apply to some people better than others. Some people are perfectly mature and emotionally ready to have sex when they're 14. Others, probably not till they're 40. Fine. But this idea that like it's arbitrary, I don't think is like controversial. Of course it's arbitrary. Anything that's culturally defined is in that sense arbitrary.
You and I agree on that, I think. And I am a psychotic person that brings stuff like this up with people at work because I'm curious to hear what normal people think about it. And it is not controversial. We were looking at the sex offender registry at work the other night, and I brought up like, yeah, so I mean, this guy, because it says when you look at the sex offender registry, it has a differentiation for if it was like 2 people that were under 20 or something, you know what I mean? Which is like, and you're like, okay, well, that's less controversial, right? So, and then I'll be like, yeah, so what is the line? And some of the people I work with are parents of children who are way more invested in this thought process. And like, so I find it more common in talking to these people that they think it should be even younger, that even 18 is too young. There's no awareness that it is an arbitrary distinction amongst the normal people I ask about this in my work.
I have a quick non sequitur, and I believe, Adam, I think I saw in fact, I'm almost positive that you and I saw the Transformers movie together. And there's a scene in there where one of the characters in the Transformers movie, on his person at all times, has the Romeo and Juliet statue that is pulled out, which of course, for those that do not know, that is where if 2 people begin a sexual relationship before the age of consent, and then somebody passes the age of consent while somebody is below it, then that is not that is legal.
Which not all states have. I believe that one is in Texas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Cares. I mean, like that, yeah, you're gonna have variation. People are gonna argue about the line, fine. But like, I'm just like, I don't see why this is like a big debate at all. I guess I agree with you then, Adam. Like, who can't, like,
yeah, it sounds like we're on the same page. I just feel like there's no way we're ever gonna like litigate people's sex lives that isn't more causing more unnecessary problems than it's solving.
well, okay, to give for a second the institutions the benefit of the doubt. The ideal is that the motivation for the rationale for those laws is to protect people who can't protect themselves from harm.
Sure.
And you're saying that, well, many of those relationships aren't actually harmful, and that's true, which is why there's controversy and disagreement around the laws. But it's also true that there's a lot of sexual harm, right? And that's why
people age out of it. My point is like, there's sexual harm happening to people of all ages that's not litigated at all.
Well, when the Penn State doctor, guy, the Penn State or the Michigan State doctor or the Penn State
defensive coordinator,
football coach, like manipulated teenagers and college students into, those kinds of sexual relationships. I think that's what we're thinking about when we have these laws, right? We want to be at a place where we can agree that that's a bad thing, that those people were manipulative and used the fact that they were smarter and more elevated than the victim in order to have sex.
Sure. And I'm saying that continues to happen through all ages and demographics. And yet somehow no one is trying to litigate it after you're 18 if it isn't rape.
Yeah.
Well,
and that's the distinction. I'm like, I agree that happens. It totally happens. And I agree that it happens more with younger people, but it doesn't just stop. I think people like naively are like, well, once you're an adult, you're incapable of being exploited by more powerful.
Well, it's wrong. That's, like Harvey Weinstein, was doing.
And that's the thing. I don't think we should push to make sure that there's litigation to cover all of it, because I don't think that more litigation is going to solve more problems than it creates. And that's my overarching point on the issue.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad that we keep things light on this.
Yeah, certainly.
And here's what I'll also say. Like we're talking about with Holly Golightly being a archetype that encourages negative cultural behavior. I think about all the like 20-somethings that are like, I'm going to go to New York and be like Holly Golightly, that end up being like in sex slavery or something. Like, I feel like Holly Golightly is probably more responsible for the like willful exploitative sexual relationships than like, much pornography.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you.
Well, and as long as we are on this topic, I guess I will say, and this actually, do we want to continue on this topic, or do we want to move on to something else?
I said my piece. I still have a full page of other notes about the movie that are less, political.
Well, I got
Yeah.
about 15 minutes left. No, I'm just kidding. I do have to take a piss break.
Yeah.
So not only do I want to pause the recording, but I want you both to stop talking.
No.
You can pause the recording, but you can't kill rock and roll, man.
I don't even want to pause the recording. In fact, I
Well,
love that all of this is on the recording. I was just kidding.
Well, you're. I want to continue with my talking points, and you got to do what you got to do, Evan, so I can do.
Faster when me and your dad will continue the real talk.
I have a point to make about my dad later on.
Just go pee. Get it over with. Get out of here.
I'm worried I'm going to miss something.
Of course you are. That's why you have to pee your pants like I do.
No, I think that you just need to get rid of the attachment of what you might miss.
Thanks, Mike. You're going to go right for the jugular, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Mike and I were talking about attachment yesterday. It was a great conversation.
Yeah.
Are you peeing yet?
Just
go. Get the fuck out of here.
So actually, I want to say, Adam, there were a couple of occasions where I immediately thought of you in this movie.
Oh yeah?
I believe there were a couple of occasions on like their big day out where one of the characters said, "Let's get out of here."
There were two. They each get one.
Yeah, and
Out of here.
I want to say that since you brought my attention to that phrase, I have it took me a little while, but now I am acutely aware of when either that phrase is said in a movie or when a close but not exact variation of it is said in a movie either. So now that
don't need to include the variations for it to be like overwhelmingly like omnipresent with how common it is. And just to give credit where it is due, the popularization of that as the most commonly said line in movies is a Roger Ebert thing. I don't remember what review or piece of writing it was, but Roger Ebert is the one who proposed it in popular culture, and I am merely working off of that. Specifically, the Cinemageddon forums, people were debating most common lines, and someone was like, well, Ebert, who saw a lot of movies, thought it was this, and he's totally right.
Well, I want to ask, because so you no longer are curating that.
I locked myself out of the account, and the idea of restarting because like it started as a Vine, which Vine was great, and then Vine got shut down. I ported it all over, and then I got locked out of that account. So I could start it from scratch a third time, but that's just like such an overwhelmingly tedious amount of work for the like 5 people I know that like were entertained by it, that I just enjoy them. You know, not everything needs to be shared with the world. We can all just privately enjoy the Let's Get Out of Here, just like you were saying you did in this movie.
Well, that's right. Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, in a sense, as just to paraphrase Shakespeare, all the world's a Let's Get Out of Here.
It's nothing good or bad, but thinking makes it so.
So I have another topic that I wanted to just discuss on here, actually going through this one. And so this is well, I'll just go with it, is that when they were at the Tiffany's and they the guy behind the counter was talking about engraving the ring on the Cracker Jack box.
Oh, how cute.
And he said about how the gifts in Cracker Jack boxes provide continuity with the past. I like that one.
I will say my note about that scene is specifically, and I will quote my note, where did I write it here? The Tiffany's clerk is the best actor in the movie. Him reacting to them is the peak acting, most resonant scene of the whole movie, because they're doing their obnoxious bullshit. And he's just like, okay, like they're trying to do some like punked hidden camera, like, what, are we crazy? We're gonna go to the fancy store and make the guy be shocked. And he's not shocked at all. He's just like, oh yes, you know, Cracker Jacks makes me this for my youth. Yeah. And he sells it better than they sell their whole romantic arc in the movie.
Yeah.
He has more emotion talking about Cracker Jacks than Audrey Hepburn or the fuck George Papard managed to have about each other.
I have a question. Have either of you ever been to a Tiffany's?
What the fuck do you think?
Definitely not Adam. Mike?
Well, so to my knowledge, there's one Tiffany's in the world, and it's in Manhattan.
No, there's one right on 6th Street in Seattle. And I know that because it was right next to where I used to work. And I had deep revulsion from this whole thing with Tiffany's because, again, like, I did that shit. I went to the, when I was a young man, I had a girlfriend who probably saw this movie, and that's part of why she was so fucked up, who wanted Tiffany's junk.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was the classic, like, I was 23, 24. I didn't have a lot of money. So I had to find something at Tiffany's, and if they know, Tiffany's makes tons of shit for stupid assholes like me and Fred. I bought this gal's, I don't even remember what it was. It's a jewelry. And now I feel
great.
What's that?
Did you get it engraved?
I think I did, yeah. I think I did. And it's stuff, it's like the cringy stuff. See, unlike my brother Nick, I'm not afraid to take a look at my past and bear all for the world.
That's what makes the podcast great. That's why you're on the podcast and he isn't.
Mm-hmm.
This particular gal called me babe. She was one of those who say something like, "Hey, babe," babe. So now, like, I have so many, like, I can never date again because I've had so many of these little traumas. And these poor, you meet a woman now and it's just like they have one little thing that that rings one of those bells, and it's just like I just start vomiting uncontrollably and I can't do it, which is why it's just me and the tortoise.
Yeah. So yeah, that's
Because you can't be like Audrey Hepburn and just throw the tortoise in a trash-filled alley. That's a lifelong commitment that's going to outlast your life. So it's important that the tortoise be your priority.
Well, she didn't throw it out. The cat was out there for 2
Push. That cat didn't want to go in the rain. She had to push it to get it out.
She's crazy. She's
and that's what I'm saying. You're not like her because you're committed to the tortoise.
I am committed to the choice. It's my responsibility. But he doesn't call me babe either.
That's because he has a wisdom beyond the span of human lifetime.
Waking up right now.
My note about the scene where they go to Tiffany's, because she talks about how she goes there with no intent to buy anything because it just relaxes her and she likes to be around it.
Yeah,
what it reminded me of, and I don't remember exactly what the source tape was, but when I was in college and some friends of mine had like a Tupac, it wasn't like a documentary, but it was some kind of like Tupac video that had music videos and then other kind of behind the scenes stuff. And the best part was a part where Tupac and some friends are just walking around Manhattan, smoking weed and doing an activity that they talk about liking to do, which is get high and go to a tall building and just ride the elevator up and down. And they go in, the guy with the camera goes in with them as they do this. And they just go in some fucking office building and just like start, riffing on the people in the elevator. And it looks like such a good time. And that is a version of what Audrey Hepburn is talking about that I like. I was trying to find something relatable to because everything she does I hate and she's horrible. But I was like, but I do kind of see the connection between Tupac wanting to go in a tall building and just ride the elevator and Audrey Hepburn wanting to wander around Tiffany's.
Yeah. I found the store relaxing. The one in the movie, the big one in the movie, the one in Seattle is not that big. It's not that nice. But I would like to go to Tiffany's in New York, buy something for myself.
I want to, what the scene does make me think of a little bit, particularly the man working behind the counter, arguably being the best actor in the movie, and him talking about like the reflection of the past and whatnot. And Adam, can you still hear me?
Yeah, I just said my dogs they really don't like that I don't let them fucking get up in my business while I'm doing that.
Okay, got it. So of course, we're going to get into some this observation here is going to get into some Mike's Movie Podcast housekeeping here. So that scene, of course, makes me think a bit of Charlton Heston and his cameo in Wayne's World 2. The original suggestion that I had was doing a Wayne's World 2 Breakfast at Tiffany's double feature. And the question I have for you, Adam, is you were not interested in that. And are you not a fan of Wayne's World 2?
I probably like Wayne's World 2 more than first Wayne's World. I like Wayne's World. I love Carvey. I like Mike Myers. But for whatever reason, Wayne's World, the whole thing was just never something I got big into. I don't get excited about it. I've seen both of them multiple times, but it was never my favorite. Even back the heat of like peak interest in 90s SNL spin-off shit, Wayne's World was, I always liked it. And I've seen, like I said, I've seen them, and I probably prefer 2 to 1. I don't have any idea if that's normative or not. I just like, that's something where when I think about it, I don't have an urge to revisit it. I'm like, oh yeah, that's a totally fun movie that I've enjoyed watching that I just don't have an urge to go back to.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And that answers my question. And I know that I think my enthusiasm for those movies is quite higher than yours on that one. I do understand liking Wayne's World 2 more than Wayne's World 1, because I think that Wayne's World 2 kind of gets more into into Naked Gun territory with its humor.
I still think you guys should do it. There's nothing wrong with me sitting one out.
Well,
It's like the Terminator 2. I mean, the Wayne's Worlds, they were the two tapes in my collection that I watched them over and over and over again, and I don't know what drew me to the movies. So I mean, lots of things, but yeah, I was in love with both Wayne's Worlds. I think I also would take 2. It's just a little bit bigger in its kind of scale. The whole like festival they plan, there's more of the kind of rock and roll, like Aerosmith's in it. Wayne's World 1, you only get Alice Cooper, which is like, who cares? I mean, he's funny in the movie, but like Wayne's World 2, you got Christopher Walken.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you have an old man fashioning a kayak out of a wooden log.
Yeah, that shit's great. That's great. Yeah. It's like Coneheads, like those 90s SNL Penelope Spheris stuff. I'll eat all that stuff. It's great. I'll take as much as you got. That's my favorite shit. Kids today like SNL. Have either of you watched an episode of Saturday Night Live in the last 10 years?
No, so I have, and I want to say, just to talk about this, my thoughts, just to jump right into this conversation. What I don't like about Saturday Night Live these days is I know that there is a lot of political humor that they have on the show, and I think the thing is I feel like what they're doing is basically a cosplay rather than any sort of like jokes. It's like you have people that are basically portraying the characters, but they're not. There's no joke or humor to it. And I'm going to sound like an old man here, but like there's a famous sketch where Phil Hartman plays Ronald Reagan, and like he plays like Ronald Reagan. It's like the genuine impression, and then like they cut away, and like Ronald Reagan is actually like this at mastermind, and just like kind of like bouncing back and forth between those two things, and which is great, and it's like Phil Hartman at his best, but like that there's a joke there. There's the impression of Ronald Reagan. Then there's like the Ronald Reagan mastermind. There's a joke. For the political humor with SNL these days, it's like I just don't know what the joke is. It's like people playing a slightly. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And obviously, we just don't get it because it's like the younger people love it. They love SNL.
Is that? Do you have primary sources to cite for that?
I'm not gonna don't know them, but yeah, I have lots of students I interact with. They watch that shit.
Because I believe it. I just have no direct contact myself. So I would have no,
This is why- this-
I would have no idea.
This is why I bring it up, as somebody who interacts with a lot of early 20s people, it's big. It's big. Like, it maintains a popular presence, and people work through it all week. And when I watch, it's unwatchable. It's absolutely unwatchable. Like, if you grew up watching any of the SNL, pre-2000, and that's what you think of as Saturday Night Live, and you try to watch it now, it's like this. I can't. I'd rather watch anything like this.
So here's my question. When does it end for you guys? I know when it ends for me in terms of tolerability. I'm curious what your end point.
Like for me, I'll just say, like, there are individual efforts over the last 20 years that have been good, right? Like Kristen Wiig and what's his name? I like Bill Hader. Those are exceptions to the rule. The writing and talent has been so bad over the past couple of decades. So for me, the end is like Will Ferrell.
Mm-hmm.
So you won't even say that, because I find the Will Forte, Bill Hader, Kristen Wiig era still overall tolerable. If there's a random one on TV, I'll be like, oh, I'll check it out. And then after that, when you get to like the closest I get to after that is like the Kyle Mooney, Beck Bennett, there's things in the middle of the bad era. And that's as late as I have ever found any of it tolerable. But there are Kyle Mooney, Beck Bennett things in that era that I still find tolerable. But that era is even over now.
Yeah, no, the Will Forte stuff, I basically enjoy all the stuff that he does because he has so much enthusiasm about everything. And he also has a sketch on there too, which is going to come as no surprise that I'm such a fan of it. It's with Will Forte and Jason Sudeikis, and they are a reverse Bon Jovi cover band, John Bovi, and they like the lyrics of the Bon Jovi songs are like, dying on a prayer, and give my foot, we won't make it, I swear. So it says, I just am howling in laughter when I see this.
We should talk about all of it. We had a pretty good round of opposite titles for this one that I don't think I had the group.
Glad that came up. Wow, yeah. I still feel that I won that.
I assume yours are nonsensical on purpose. I didn't understand either of yours, Evan. I believe there were two. One of them was literally gibberish. The other one, I didn't understand the first word. It was also do you remember yours?
No, I have to look, but I know I won. So to clarify because I don't think any of the three people who listen to this podcast know that we do this.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like, it's something Mike and I have been doing for a couple years, and now Adam's gotten involved as well, which is fantastic.
Mm-hmm. You should just read them. Just go through.
I'm going to. I have to scroll and find them. So
I brought it up to Izzy, and Izzy has her own contribution, which I think is better than mine, which I'll share at the end.
Yeah, these are fucking good. Oh, and by the way, we had to cancel. We were ready to go on this last week, and
I had a car accident. I could have died.
An unprecedented cancellation from Adam Higgins, who never.
I was in the ER, like on an IV, like, guys, I can't do it.
He's on life support. We're just like unfucking believable.
Yeah. I kind of half expected you to be wearing like a neck brace with a couple black eyes.
I barely made it.
So what happens often is you guys have like a really robust exchange that I can't even, like, when I finally see it, I'm just like, what's going on? And I don't like that. So make sure if you're going to text, try to do it between the hours of 7 and 10 p.m. Eastern. Anything after or before.
I think this was. I was on break at work, which is like 8:30.
This was. Okay, so I'm going to read the Mike Constantine oxymoronic titles that we have selected. We have a little competition.
Credit each with who said them.
Can we, before we get into this, maybe give a classic example, Mike, of one of these titles that you selected?
The John Bovi.
John Bovi. But that's not quite it. So John Bovi wouldn't cut the mustard in Mike.
Oh, not John Bovi, but his examples of the John Bovi lyrics were what reminded me of it.
Yeah, hold on. Well, geez. Oh,
What was the Naked Gun one? The Naked Gun one was the one that really set me off in the first place.
well, the Naked Gun one was the clothed knife.
Yeah, knife. Get the fuck out of here, knife.
Yeah.
But yeah, clothes knife.
So
Okay.
I'll say like an example of one is that I would have is for like say Van Halen. Let's say I want to do a reverse Van Halen song. Instead of saying, well, in fact, I won't say what it would be a plan, but something like cold for student would be an example of a Van Halen.
Mike and I have tons of these.
And I think the classic one that got it all started was Dry Cold Canadian Winter.
But that was in high school. Yeah, that was Dry Cold Canadian Winter. Yeah. All right, so I'm gonna go down. So we applied this method for Breakfast at Tiffany's, or Mike got it going here. So starting, this is 8:09 p.m., which is why I was a member of this exchange on February 28th, a long time ago. Unless Mike utilizes his executive veto, I heartily co-sign, sure, next Sunday, March 7th at 3 p.m. Adam/Evan time.
Quick note, it's March 14th right now.
Correct. Mike says, I co-sign as well. I'm ready to get some dinner at Bethany's. Okay. The ball rolling. Adam, I'm going to interpret the opposite a bit differently. According to Wikipedia, okay, Mr. Wikipedia, the male version of Tiffany is Theophanies. So regurgitation away from Theophanies. Theophanies. Regurgitation away from Theophanies. Mike said, you beat me at my own game. And then I dropped a bomb. You guys didn't even get it.
I still don't get it.
Mend slow anywhere but Claire's.
Could you please explain that one?
Okay, so if you break something, the opposite would be to mend it.
Okay.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. I did not see that one coming. How about my Claire?
Wait, hold on a second. Can I ask? Is Claire's, if you go to a shopping mall and you want to get some cheap jewelry, you go to Claire's.
There's a cheap plastic jewelry shop. See?
Wow. It was just over my head. It was right over my head.
Anywhere but instead of
I need interpretational support to get me there.
But then wait, there's more. Mike comes in with fasting away from Todd's. Why fasting? Oh, instead of eating breakfast, you're fasting?
He corrects himself. Continuing
Continuing your fast away from Todd's. And then I just put in a bunch of jibber jabber. Adam's not done yet. Dying of starvation, a great distance from confusion. Oh.
Which was because Tiffany is from the same root as Epiphany, according to
The
Wikipedia.
opposite of confusion. That's way more obscure than my men slow anywhere but Claire's.
That's why I explain it, because I know it's obscure. You just drop it with no explanation. Is that the last one?
No. Oh wait, maybe it was. Yeah.
So I explained this concept to Izzy, and her suggestion, and I'm going to explain the logic to not do an Evan. So breakfast is a meal that you eat in the morning, right? Yeah. So for that part, her interpretation of the opposite was shitting at night. And then for Tiffany's, she was like, Tiffany's is like a fancy jewelry store, right? Like, what's the opposite of a fancy jewelry store? And she decided a landfill. So it was shitting at night on the far side of a landfill.
Okay, yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, it's a great game. It's great stuff. Mike did one of these that we're not going to be able to explain because it's like only he and I know the content. But it made me laugh so hard one night. I mean, I thought I was going to die. I thought I was going to fucking die. So Eric Johnson, who we still have to finish the Eric Johnson song draft.
World waiting.
I would say his second best song is a song called Manhattan. And we were doing this with Eric Johnson songs back and forth, all through the catalog. And Mike hit the grand slam, and I look at my phone and he just sent a text and he's referring to the song Manhattan. He just wrote Racine, which is our I fucking died.
Yeah.
It was the best night of my life.
It's I want to say it's been it's tough. It's tough when you set the world record and know that you're never going to be able to break it again.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you're already number one. Why try harder?
Yeah,
there's more in there. I know there's more to come.
Yeah, no, this is just getting started. I want to say real quick too, as a quick thought, is we are coming up on the 1 year anniversary almost of Larry.
Mike sent me a text the other day. It's almost been 1 year since we watched Larry.
Yeah,
Lawrence of Arabia from our.
I mean, you're gonna make it a tradition, and I'll watch it this time.
Watch it again,
Guys, let's just watch the same movies we watched this past year every year for the rest of our lives.
Well, I do. When Mike's done with his thought, I think we should go around and pick. If you could watch one more of the movies, which one of the movies that we did over the last year would you be most likely to watch again?
I mean, we're not done with Tiffany's, right? I still have all kinds of shit.
Yeah. I think we should save this for the end when we do the cheeseburgers and all that stuff. I'll remember.
I'm gonna have to think. I'm gonna have to think about. I mean, there's Larry, Benny, Doc, Bridgie.
Yeah, but Mike, so those four weren't actually part of the pod. That was just like a friendship thing that we did, and then we were gonna have a Warren.
I'm a special guest. I don't have to be there for it to be official. That's why I'm a special guest.
Well, the thing is that only I have to be there.
Yeah, all the best ones are Mike by himself talking
I would
about.
love to see more Mike by himself, honestly. But,
No, you wouldn't.
I would drop everything. If I got a notification that there was a solo Mike's movie podcast, I would call into work, tell Izzy I needed some quiet alone time, and shut myself in my room and immediately watch it with rapt attention.
I need to be an absolute wet blanket on the enthusiasm there, because I am not a solo artist. If it's just me talking, I need to riff with other people to get going. I cannot create any sort of entertainment solo. It would be, it would be like if you it would be like my version would be like the guy when we saw The Astrologer who was doing
Oh, have we talked about how that movie is now impossible to see?
We have not.
Because they did those screenings and there was gonna be a DVD and Blu-ray, but the guy who made that movie, who stars in that movie, is no one knows what happened to him. He could still be alive. He's an unknown. No one can track him down. But the people that paid for it are still around. And there was some kind of legal altercation where now the Blu-ray DVD was canceled and it is illegal to show anywhere. You can now only watch pirated versions of that movie. That was set to be a new The Room crazy movie that everyone talks about. But because of legal stuff. Oh, and because they use, I don't remember this, but apparently they used tons of Blue Oyster Cult music in the movie, which was not licensed at all. So if they ever were going to do it, someone would have to pay the estate of Blue Oyster Cult tons of money that would not be recouped in the sales of Astrologer Blu-rays. So we really should treasure that screening, because neither of us, it'll be very difficult to ever see it again.
Well, yeah, and that was, if I remember correctly, that was a midnight screening too.
Correct.
Yeah, which was yeah. Was that part of the SIF film festival?
I think it was part of the actual film festival. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, should we finish up the notes that people have on this dumb movie?
Yeah, I got just some funny quotes, things that people said that I liked. I really liked that the mob guy's named Sally Tomato and that she meets the lawyer at Hamburger Heaven. That's great. I like when she's talking about her big older brother and how she says it must have been the peanut butter that he ate. And also, the whole thing with her brother is so shoehorned in. We never meet him, and then she just gets upset when he dies. That's an absurd
Well, I
conceit of
think
the
they
plot.
were trying to pack a complex book into 2 hours. I got that sense from a lot of the things.
I also wrote down that party when she like invites Idiot Man over for a drink and then she's having some crazy party. That party is my worst nightmare. I just wrote nightmare party. That whole situation, it reminded me of any time I've ever been to a house party in my life and about how that is like worse than prison to me. I'd rather have a month in solitary confinement than spend another minute at a party, a crowded house party like that. And I can tell that's another thing that's supposed to be fun and cool where I'm just like, oh, get it out of here. Specifically, the funniest part about the party scene is the really tan lady who's like maniacally laughing and then sobbing at herself in the mirror. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do remember that.
And then I forget who Audrey says it about, but there's a point in the party scene when she refers to someone as being a bore. And I was like, man, if this party is not a bore, sign me up for being a bore. The fucking song, the horrible schmaltzy song that I didn't know originated from this movie, Moon River. Yeah. Specifically, I had never really thought about Moon River in a long time, but my favorite lyric in Moon River that I cracked up in every of the 100 times I do it in the movie is "My Huckleberry Friend." My Huckleberry Friend. What the? Anyway, I like that. That was another thing I wrote down. I wrote down that Audrey is so abysmal at playing drunk that I know pretending to be drunk is like a famous challenge to actors, but her being drunk in this movie is the most embarrassing attempt to pretend to be drunk I've ever.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because it's news to me that she was supposed to be drunk in the movie at any point.
The scene starts when she's at the strip club, and then
that's right. Okay,
down the cupboards.
Okay, yeah, there's that scene. Was she supposed to be drunk at any other point in the movie besides
She's
that one?
casually drinking the whole movie, but that's the one scene where they're making a point that she's drunk and she's doing a horrible job of it. I also really liked the part when they're talking about their day that they're gonna have, and she's like, "I can't think of anything I've never done," and just the idea that someone would say and mean that they can't think of anything they've never done was just a real inciting moment for me with her character. I forgot to look it up, but in the break, so the clerk at Tiffany's is the best acting, most emotionally resonant part of the movie. Second place, Patricia O'Neil's reaction to Idiot Man breaking up with her is the second. Everything in that scene with her is great. And specifically in that scene, when she's writing him the check, she says, like, "I am a very stylish girl." That's sampled in some electronic music, and I didn't figure out what it is. But that is like, I always enjoy when I see a movie and it hits something that I've heard sampled that I didn't know what it was. The Swimmer, when he says, "I'll be your guardian angel" in The Swimmer, is the last time I enjoyed it. It's just a very special feeling that you don't get that often.
Yeah,
I
was gonna say, I thought Patricia O'Neil. I liked her character a lot in the movie.
I didn't even know. I was like, why did she was vaguely familiar to me, but I didn't know anything about it. And I looked her up because I was like, really liked her in that scene. And she was married to Roald Dahl for like most of her life, which is crazy. And also, I learned from Wikipedia that she aborted a child from Gary Cooper that she had when she had an affair with Gary Cooper, which is some great Hollywood stuff. And then what else about her? Oh, that like this movie, I was like, yeah, what is she in? She's in other stuff. And this movie for her was in between A Face in a Crowd and what the fuck is the other one? She was in like, HUD. She's the maid in HUD. This is like her slumming it. That made so much more sense to me, being like, why is this lady so much better than the leads? It's like, she shouldn't have even been in the movie. She's better than that. What else did I write down? When she's making dinner, when has him over, when she's going to marry the Brazilian guy, and she's making the chicken dinner, and then it blows up, and Idiot Man says like, "I'm not much for chicken with sauce." That really cracked me up. And I forget even who says it. It's in the letter from the Brazilian guy when he's breaking up with her after the drug bust. And the quote is, I grieve for the disgrace of your present circumstances. I was like, I definitely want to like work that into like normal conversation because that's a really funny way to say that. And then the last thing is at the end, right after she reads that letter, she makes some reference with some slang I'd never heard of where she refers to either him or the letter as square ball jazz. And that also had me rolling on the floor. Another thing I'm going to try and work in conversation. Those are my notes.
Square ball jazz, and I grieve for your present circumstances.
I grieve for the disgrace of your present circumstance.
And so wasn't the Brazilian the telegram from the Brazilian royalty? It was supposed to be somewhat broken English.
Right? Is it? I thought it was supposed to be really like overwrought and stilted because he like knows he's being an asshole, but he's trying to.
I wasn't sure. Sentences like that suggest what you just said, but there were some other sentences that were funny and kind of off that made me think that it was just he was just supposed to like be not quite 100% on how to be properly overwrought and wordy in the English language, but small point, doesn't matter.
Well, do we want to assign some cheeseburgers to this movie?
Yeah, but I do want to.
It's all gravy now.
Yeah, I want to revisit the question of what of the ones we reviewed over the past year.
You're going to have to go on the list.
We're going to go through the list. So for pandemic, we're going to go through the list, and everybody's going to pick the one that basically your favorite from the pandemic list. You're most apt to watch again. Now, in order to go through the list, I'm going to have to pull up the YouTube channel, which I usually just forget exists. And I pray that one day my students don't find. You guys seem to think that that's a lot more probable than that somebody who knows me finds it. How would they find it?
I don't know, but I know that these kids these days are better at the internet than us. I'm sure they have ways.
It does. My profile does bear my full name. Maybe that's anyhow. Got a picture of Ivan on it too. Videos. Wow, we've been busy, gang. Okay. So I'm going to go in order. What we've done. So. Where's Larry? Well, we did Larry, Lawrence of Arabia, Ben-Hur. So, Mike, we did Larry and Benny in one podcast. There's a podcast called Larry and Benny. And this is how you know Adam wasn't on the podcast. These early ones are all around 40 minutes each. So Larry and Benny, Dr. Zhivago, The Bridge on the River Kwai, Naked Gun, and we did some song draft stuff, and then we picked it back up with I'm Thinking of Ending Things.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
8mm. It's so funny. Like, so all the ones with just me and Mike are 40 minutes. All the ones with the three of us, 2 hours. They're all 2 hours. Give or take 10 minutes. Okay, so after I'm Thinking of Ending Things, we did 8mm, followed by Major Pain. And then we had special extra guest, Shane, for The Lighthouse. Speaking of which, I want to hear, Adam, if you've heard anything from Shane. Maybe we can say
it's really no.
No is the answer? Okay. After The Lighthouse, we did Virtuosity. And I think that was the last.
Well, there is also a separate one that is on my YouTube channel, which was just Adam and myself doing Johnny Mnemonic and Predator 2.
And I'm really mad I missed that one. See, Adam can't do it, and we wait for him. I couldn't make the one, and you guys just want to say, fuck them. We're just going to do it. That's how it is.
I'm gonna have to go through our text. I'm gonna have to go through our text thread, but I'm pretty sure that you like gave us your blessing to go on without it.
Yeah, sure you were like, fuck you guys. I don't want to watch that shit. Do it without me.
Yeah.
You guys, I work 7 days a week, man. I have no life. That's the right response. Self-inflicted. All right. Well, I'm gonna go first. My pick would be Virtuosity.
What? Why? We just watched that one.
That's my favorite of the ones that
I guess honestly that should make sense to me because that's the one I've seen the most in my life, and I'm reacting that way because I've already seen it so many times.
I'd only
If
seen
I
that
hadn't, I would probably feel the same way.
That was my first viewing, and it was the best. It was my favorite thing that I've watched probably all year. And Lighthouse, I also loved. I mean, I really loved the Lighthouse. I liked the old shit that we watched. A lot of good stuff. I could take or leave, thinking of ending things. I could definitely take or leave Breakfast at Tiffany's. Major Pain, I've seen a bajillion times. Love it. I mean, that's a great movie. Whatever. So that's my pick. Mike?
If we were to do one of these again, which one would it be?
Yeah.
That's a tricky one because
well, that's not what I asked, but that actually, I like that question better. Yeah. So if we were to do a podcast on one of these again.
Oh, yeah. Sorry for misunderstanding. Which one of these?
That's what I assumed you were asking.
Yeah, let's go with that. So my answer is the same. Virtuosity.
Well, geez, which one of these did I like the most out of all of them that we saw? Wow. Which one I want to do again? The one thing the one that I will say is that of all the movies that we watched, I do very much want to see on a proper screen 70 millimeter version of Larry. I know that Cinerama has their 70 millimeter film festival, and Lawrence of Arabia is usually pretty prominently featured at that. That's the one I would most want to have an immersive experience watching on a big screen.
Well, in a couple months' time, you might be able to go to the movie theater. And
isn't Cinerama the one that changed ownership and there's like protests and controversy?
Yeah, I'm not 100% up to speed, but I think that's right, and I think there is some question as to whether or not Cinerama is going to stay open.
Yeah, I believe that.
Which would be unfortunate, and I think that is certainly related to the death of Paul Allen, because I think that if Paul Allen was still alive, that there's no way that theater would be destroyed.
Yeah, I can't remember, but I feel like I made a joke. I made a conspiracy Illuminati joke about who killed Paul Allen related to closing the theater and why around that time, but I can't remember. I'll have to go back and watch all our podcasts again and find it.
Yeah. Is the stupid Experience Music Project still open in Seattle?
It is, yeah.
There's Jimi Hendrix bullshit I can go see.
I've been to that fucking thing like 10 times. That's a
yeah. And I've been there too. Like, you have people that visit you from Seattle, and it's like, what do you want to do? And it's like, well, it's in the neighborhood, so let's go.
They want Jimi Hendrix jockstrap.
Well, I mean, it is. Well, when you get into the there's the EMP, and then there's the other part that I for whatever reason I can't think of what it's called. The science fiction side or whatever, or maybe it's all part of the same. No, Mopop. No, Mopop is the name of the museum now.
The complex.
It used to be the Experience Music Project. Now the whole thing is Mopop, and part of it will have exhibits like they had like a Jim Henson exhibit. You had a horror movie exhibit, had like a science fiction exhibit, and like the vast majority of the stuff there is from like the Paul Allen personal collection.
Right.
So
yeah, I mean,
he's going to have all that buried with him in his massive sarcophagus, so that's probably not going to happen anymore.
Yeah, not as much. I don't know the ones that were my favorite to watch. That's a difficult question because I liked pretty much everything that we watched, and there's nothing that really like immediately jumps out as to the like a head and shoulders above the rest. With that said, if I were to rewatch, I don't know. I mean, I think of all those movies, I do think, geez, I'm like overthinking my response here. And this is going to be, I think this is going to be a bit of a controversial choice, or maybe a lame one. But of all those movies, I think that my true favorite of the bunch is Virtuosity.
Wow.
Classic Evan and Mike agreement.
Yeah. It's so funny because before anyone said their answer, I was like, let's all like without anyone revealing it, write down our answer, because I feel like there's a viral thought thing that happens with you guys that just happened again, that I'm curious if it would have happened the same way if you had in isolation write down your answers.
What's more funny to me than the bizarre Evan and Mike agreement, the preponderance of agreements that we have, is Adam's reaction to it. Like that's the funniest thing. It's just so like unbelievable. I can't believe they're agreeing. That's the most boring thing ever. Okay, so Adam, what do you say?
Well, for me, it's actually really easy because there's a pretty binary switch for me with movies I want to watch and talk about repetitively versus ones I don't. And of the ones this year, ones I have already watched repetitively and will get excited at an opportunity to discuss, it's like 8mm, Johnny Mnemonic, Virtuosity, and the one I'm going to pick, which is, of those, usually like if I watch it repetitively, I like find new stuff and get more excited every time. And then when I watch it for the podcast, I really engage with it even more academically than I would casually. And in most cases, that slightly diminishes my like fun level. I still love it. It doesn't like make me love it less, but I don't really like have as much fun. And there's only one where even watching it for the podcast, I had more notes than I've ever had. And because it was the me and Mike by ourselves episode, I didn't have dead time to refer to my notes. I didn't even get through my notes for Predator 2. Predator 2, I loved even more, even watching it academically for the podcast. I for sure only got through half my notes because when it's me and Mike, there's no third party talking for me to like cross-reference my notes. And I remember the day after being like, fuck, I forgot all the shit I had a lot to say about Predator 2, and now we're never going to talk about it again. So me, hands down, Predator 2.
It's sort of like when Shane had a lot that he didn't get to say on the.
Yeah, that's true. We really should do the Lighthouse again with Shane by himself, so Shane can share all the thoughts we oppressed him with our finale from Shared with the World.
I do want to revisit this for real quick, and why this is such a difficult question to ask is because of all the movies that we watched, like without a question, the most influential of all of those is The Naked Gun. For me.
Yeah. Good. I mean,
yeah.
Naked Gun after Major Pain might also be the one I've seen the most times.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably a tie between that and Major Pain. And that makes it tough, kind of like your point, Adam, about Virtuosity. Like, Major Pain and Naked Gun are already embedded in my neural circuitry from childhood. So I can't really compare. It's sort of like when Crazy Train didn't even make the draft for Ozzy Osbourne. It's like, if it didn't make the draft, we've heard it 10 billion times. We don't want to even talk about it anymore. It's sort of like that, although I really do want to talk about it. I'd be happy to do another podcast about any of those movies that have come up in the running. So Adam picked Predator 2. So you might even say, Adam, that of the movies, you would rank Predator 2 as number one.
No, I wouldn't say that. And furthermore, I would say I definitely rewatch things all the time. But if I was going to do a podcast, I don't really want to rewatch things for the podcast, honestly.
I'm not suggesting we do it. I just wanted to go do this. We do a little round robin, get some input. We spitball some ideas. We circle back. And
related to this topic, I really liked Mike's left field curveball choice of Breakfast at Tiffany's, which I would never have chosen to watch ever in my life. And I think that even though I didn't like it and I wouldn't recommend it or choose to watch it now or ever again, I did like doing it for the podcast, and I would like more left field. I would never choose to watch it of my own accord things for the podcast. That's to me, I get excited anticipating it and watching it, even if I'm not enjoying it, knowing that for the academic research and entertainment purposes of the podcast, I'm being forced to broaden my horizons. It feels constructive and productive in a way that revisiting classics that I've seen many times is fun, but doesn't feel as constructive.
Yeah. Well, I'll say of all of the podcasts that we've had, I think that this one is probably the one that was spent the highest ratio of time discussing the movie. So I think there is a relationship.
None of us have seen it before. We had a lot to say about it.
Yeah, well, lot to process and digest versus something like The Naked Gun, where, like as Evan said, it's so embedded in our being that we don't have to process it in the same way that we did Breakfast at Tiffany's. There is actually one last thing I did want to talk about with this, and I know that in the podcasts I've previously referenced Brian De Palma, and will continue to do it. In fact, you should probably watch some of his films in a future one at some point. But what I wanted to mention was one last note to get to is there is the scene when Paul and Patricia O'Neil notice somebody waiting outside on the sidewalk, and they're like, "This must be a private investigator who's watching us." So then Paul's like, I'm going to go ahead and find out, and then he just like starts walking like down to the park, and then the guy, I can't remember the name of the character, it's just like kind of walking and following him. And that just reminds me of how in De Palma's films, you have so many of these like slow motion chases where there's like two people are like walking through a public area, and they're like trying not to be conspicuous, but they're clearly trying to get away from each other. And it just reminded me of that.
For sure.
And I bring that up because I believe that was one of the pandemic films that I watched this year was Snake Eyes, and there's a scene where they're going through the hotel, just like one of these like walking, I'm in an elevator waiting with other people, trying not to be too conspicuous, and I just like that as a kind of a pursuit chase scene, and reminded me of those things. I don't know if there's any sort of influence that had on De Palma, but I just wanted to acknowledge that as an observation for the movie.
And yeah, now related to all this, Mike, do you have any ideas for the next one? I'm excited for another left field Mike pick.
Oh, I'm gonna have to wait for the inspiration for that one, and I will let you know. But I mean, I'll say this: I do, believe it or not, have a Blu-ray of The Deer Hunter. So
I will probably sit that one out. I've seen that movie. Have even less desire to rewatch it than Wayne's World 2.
Yeah. So
I would love to hear you and Evan talk about it for 15 minutes or whatever the fuck that would work out to be.
Yeah. Well, I'll let you know when the inspiration strikes. I will let everybody know. I do want to say with this one, in terms of ranking this one, on a 4 cheeseburger scale, I am going to go with 2.5 cheeseburgers.
Wow, that's high. So what was the stuff you liked that earned it the 2.5 cheeseburger?
Two and a half cheeseburgers. Wow. So that's high. I think that's like one of the lowest ones that I've given. I don't think
we usually
like,
4 burgers.
To me, 2.5, it's earned 2.5 cheeseburgers. So what of it, the movie, makes it worth 2.5 cheeseburgers to you?
Yeah, well, what we didn't talk about here, sorry not to interrupt, was that the movie is upset. It's frustrating, but it's not bad. Like it's frustrating and it's, but you also like the experience of watching it wasn't like, it was entertaining. Like we all identified some scenes that we liked. We all identified some stuff that like resonated, even if it's not in the most pleasant way. And it was not unlike the experience of watching some of the old dusty shit we did back, last year, right when it was Larry Benny, Bridge on the River. It's just like, okay, this is what it is.
I guess it's classic me having cognitive dissonance about the quantitation of thoughts on the movie, because we had a whole discussion and I feel like I understood, and then Mike hits me with the number and it just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, Mike's still explaining his numbers, so.
Well, someone
Yes. Well, I would say from start to finish, this movie captured my attention. At no point was I bored. I thought there were some scenes in the movie which, even if I did not like, and in fact maybe strongly ethically disagreed with what the characters were doing, for example, stealing from the corner store. I mean, I thought that the corner store scene, for example, was well made, and it was it's a well executed piece of piece of film there. So I think just generally, just the, it was an average movie that kept my attention from start to finish. And if I look, what else would I have been doing over that time? I think this movie was 1 hour and 55 minutes. I'm gonna have to double check the exact thing. But I think if I were to measure that against whatever else I'd be doing, it would be better than it. So I think for me, that's my baseline for a 2.5 star or 2.5 cheeseburger rating, I should say. So I think it achieved the minimal threshold of entertainment that I'm hoping for, and it did not exceed that. And that is how I would say the 2.5 cheeseburgers.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, I'm at a loss with this one, which I hate that because it does give Adam's position on the ranking system a sliver of credibility. But I think, what's making it difficult is that I don't feel it's appropriate to cheeseburger this movie based just on how well I liked it. And that's the point I was trying to make about like Larry and Benny, et cetera, which I did like those movies, but it's sort of like saying like, I don't like Jane Austen novels. They're not fun for me to read. But I'm not about to say like, yeah, it's a 1 cheeseburger, not very good. Like that just doesn't really make sense.
So is the cheeseburger ranking your own personal preference, or is it some semblance of an attempt at objective quality?
Yeah, right. So it's like, I think for my own personal preference, I'd give this movie 1 cheeseburger. For my recognition of its quality and its place in the canon, I would give it 4.
Mm-hmm.
So that's that.
I would say, I feel like, yeah.
I'm so
That makes sense.
right now. That it's like unbelievable.
It's just so funny. This is always funny to me.
Yeah. No, the thing is that with this movie, when you mentioned the giving it 4 stars for its place in the canon of cinema, is that the popularity of this movie is undeniable, and I think the impact of that is also
supposed to rank popularity. We're not like, yes, I acknowledge it's popular, 4 stars.
Yeah, no.
What? Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, the point that I'm getting at, what I found to be kind of surprising, is that, so going back to like Lawrence of Arabia and like Ben-Hur, for example, is like, I think, which are generally regarded like AFI top 100 best movies ever made. Like you can understand in terms of the acting performances and all of the stuff that goes into the movies, you can understand like why those are such highly regarded motion pictures. I just think that I feel like, Breakfast at Tiffany's is like the modern day equivalent in terms of quality of something like 500 Days of Summer, or just some other, it's like standard romantic comedy that would be made today that maybe would be, so you know what I'm saying? So
to push back a little bit. Oh no, there's an echo.
Well, I'm going to take my time where you want me to rank it to say that I understand what you're saying. And Blake Edwards, who directed it, I think is a very talented director who made many movies that I like. And I think he knows what he's doing and he does a good job. But I don't think that the fact that technically he is a skilled filmmaker who is succeeding at his goals makes this an objective or subjective success, in my opinion. And I also don't think that just because I hate all the characters is what makes it a failure, because most of my favorite bummer 70s movies are only people that are also reprehensible people. I could name 100 movies I love where all the characters are reprehensible. It's something, and I honestly would have to work through it myself. I'm speaking extemporaneously. There's something about how toxic I find the people in, which is in the opposite to how they are being presented and portrayed in this movie, that makes it so frustrating and aggravating. And to me, there's like a total disconnect between everything I thought I was going to get from it, from cultural, secondhand knowledge versus the reality of it. It was just from start to finish, when it wasn't Mickey Rooney, I was frustrated and angry at everybody except the Tiffany's clerk and the one scene with Patricia O'Neil. I just really found it to be an aggravating, negative experience, separate from any quantitation.
Yeah.
Well,
No, I would.
I think that the one
yeah.
last thing I wanted to say was that the value, when we talk about the canon, I suspect, and I have not done my homework, but I suspect it's in the portrayal of the character that Capote envisioned, which is, as we have already discussed, has had enduring influence on culture, particularly that for young girls. But this, I think there was something about the Hepburn's character, the Go Lightly character, that was novel at the time.
And I mean, I will also say Hepburn's character was her whole thing for all of her stardom era. And they're even referencing Roman Holiday in this movie. Her whole thing, it wasn't unique to this movie. This was already capitalizing on her established celebrity personality.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that. The thing that disappointed me the most about the movie was that it's okay, yeah, forget what you think about Audrey Hepburn. You want Holly Golightly I wanted her to really complete the arc of, no, I am unattached. I am this sort of drifting, free-spirited woman who is gonna use what I have to manipulate institutions and men and the power that be. I think that's probably what, if it's going to be a high-ranking film, it's to do that, to translate that idea from the book into a movie. And what disappointed me was that you got this stupid, dillweed. And I haven't read the book, so but yeah. Who ultimately succeeds in doing a very boring traditional thing. Yeah.
I do agree with you. What you described, if the movie was really intended and executed to be about Holly Golightly successfully exploiting everything, that's a subversive movie where, even though I would still hate her character, I'd be like, well, that is kind of subversive to portray this kind of person in that way. Whereas I feel like the actual movie is just being like, isn't this fun? Oh. And ending, like you're saying, the ending spoils even that potential.
Right. So maybe I'll give it 1 personal and 3 objective.
And then the last thing I wanted to say that what Evan said reminded me of is the influence of the movie. And this is pretty much, I think, going to be exclusively for Erica. But in my opinion, the contemporary emblematic persona of a modern version of the Holly Golightly psychotic New York City pixie dream girl would be Dasha Nekrasova, is 2021 Holly Golightly. And anyone who doesn't know who that is can look it up and agree or disagree, but Erica will know what I'm talking about.
I don't know who that is, but
Well, I want
a podcast. We can have her guest on our podcast.
I think it's not a podcast, Mike's Movie Podcast, if Jordan Peterson doesn't get brought up in some capacity. I do wonder if he has any sort of videos or commentary on this film, because I think it's kind of in his wheelhouse of.
Hey, you know what? But for Evan's proposed revisit, we're gonna watch Breakfast at Tiffany's again, and we're gonna have Dasha Nekrasova and Jordan Peterson on and have a round table discussion about
it. Yeah. He would say that this is he would agree with much of what we said, I feel, and think that this was no, he would think this is bad because it's teaching young girls not to not to engage in traditional forms of commitment.
But she does at the end. It's showing the error of her ways.
Can you believe
I bet
it?
he likes it. I bet he likes it. I bet he shows it to his daughter while she's eating steak or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, separate from all that, my closing question for you guys is, what other, if any, Audrey Hepburn movies have you seen, and how would you rank this amongst them?
This was my
Or Blake Edwards. And if you don't know, look, because Blake Edwards is probably most famous for the Pink Panther movies, which I watched at an age where I wasn't getting any of the sexual innuendo. And I would also say Inspector Clouseau is his own funny racial stereotype of French people. But I will throw out there, I've only seen the famous ones. I've seen Roman Holiday and Charade before this. And my favorite, which I saw most recently, is the only non-traditional, not twee cutesy Audrey Hepburn movie, is Wait Until Dark, where she is like a recently blinded woman who has like a doll full of heroin hidden in her house, and Alan Arkin and some guys know it's there and break in and torment her trying to find this doll full of heroin. And it's actually really great, and it's a good against type casting for Audrey Hepburn. And my favorite Blake Edwards movie is one he did shortly after this called Experiment in Terror, which I cannot recommend highly enough if you've ever seen it.
Yeah, I will say that in terms of Blake Edwards, in terms of Audrey Hepburn, I mean, Breakfast and Tiffany is the beginning and the end of the list.
But look at Blake Edwards' IMDb page. He's made a lot of famous movies you've probably seen.
I look at that right now. I've not seen any of them.
You've never seen any of the Pink Panther movies?
No, I've not.
Okay. The other one that anyone might have seen that is a oblique Penis Boys movie is in '89, he did a movie with John Ritter called Skin Deep. So he made this movie and some other stuff in the 60s. And then once he had the Pink Panther, he made tons of Pink Panther movies for a long time. And then in the 80s and 90s, he switched into making horny middle-aged man movies like The 10 with what's his name, drunk British guy, and then the John Ritter one, Skin Deep, which are all just kind of like a Hollywood guy is getting laid all the time and has some hilarious problems. And there's a famous scene in Skin Deep when John Ritter puts on a glow-in-the-dark condom and has a glow-in-the-dark condom sword fight with another man while they're like with the fighting over a woman he's having an affair with. Oh, and there's a fucking Burt Reynolds one, another horny middle-aged man Burt Reynolds one. Anyway, An Experiment in Terror is the best Blake Edwards movie. Wait Until Dark is the best Audrey Hepburn movie in the Adam Higgins Book of Knowledge.
S.O.B. That looks.
Is that one you've seen? That's another famous one.
No, I'm with Mike. I haven't seen jack shit. But I like the poster with this
Yep.
cartoon bull smoking a cigar.
That's what I'm saying. Blake Edwards is a very talented guy. He made a lot of movies that. Oh boy. Oh, okay. Take a hand.
Nice way to go, guys. Oh, he's remaking the Pink. No.
He's dead.
I know that I cut you off there, Adam.
No, it's fine. I get it.
The Man Who Loved Women. This is the one I need to watch.
That's the Burt Reynolds one.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Bad. All right. Well, we got to the point where we're reading IMDb, and that means we're not qualified to be making podcasts anymore.
I'm reciting this from memory. There's no IMDb.
Yes, we know. You know it. You know it all. You're the man. I don't know shit.
Well,
If you tell me, Adam, who do the Chicago Bulls face? 1993 NBA Finals. You don't know that. You are not a boy of the 90s.
That's true. I'm not.
I rest my case, folks.
And that concludes Mike's movie podcast featuring Evan with special guest Adam. And I'm going to count to 5, and Evan's going to stop hitting the record button. 1, 2, 3.